You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to me, Steve Adams on Mighty Blue, and this is Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. And today's middle section is all about a recent midlife crisis, but we're going to come to that in a moment. Our main guest today is an extremely accomplished hiker who's really only been doing long-distance hiking for the past 3 years, but he's racking up his trails all the time. He is Tom Sherry, or Stella. That's Stella with an R, by the way. Tom is going to be talking about a few of his hikes, his most recent being the Appalachian Trail. That turned out not to be his favourite, but as he says, he finds pretty much every day on the trail to be better than a day off trail. Tom will be on shortly. The middle section of the show came about partly because I haven't filled that gap in the show yet, but also because I received a bunch of emails from people who've asked me about my abortive attempt on the John Muir Trail this year. So I brought fellow podcaster, hiker and dear friend Jester to come and commiserate with me over our shared misery this summer. To be honest, it was somewhat cathartic to share it with Jester, and we kind of got it out of our system. That conversation will be on after Tom. And finally, Winton Porter tells a short story about a young man who encounters a snake and, really, what he'd been doing on the trail. It's quite a poignant chapter. So let's get on. Here's Tom Sherry, or Stella. This week's guest is a bit of a hiking overachiever. This is Tom Sherry, or Stella. Hey, Tom, how are you?
I'm doing good, Steve. How are you?
I'm good. And my first question, because I only just discovered it this morning, is why are you Stella? And it's with an R, by the way, not just an A at the end.
Oh, I can give you the short version of my trail name.
Long versions are good. We like the long version.
Okay. I got the trail name on the PCT, and after I turned down several trail names, I wasn't sure I was going to get one for a little while. Mm-hmm. But a person that I had been hiking with asked me if I knew of a specific bird, and they described the bird in detail, and I didn't. And they were from outside the U.S., and I thought I should know the name of the bird. So I got the trail name because I kind of went out of my way to, and it took several weeks to get the person the name of the bird, but I finally got the name of the bird. And then when, even a few weeks later, about 4 weeks after they had asked me, I was eating lunch with some Novos in Oregon, and this Stellar's jay landed in the middle of the group while we were eating lunch, and it was the first time I had actually seen a live one. Oh, so wow. I was excited, and I yelled out, "Look, a Stellar's jay!" And the group kind of was interested in why I was so excited to see a relatively common bird on the West Coast. And me growing up in Kansas and places east, I had never seen one. So I retold the story to them, and they thought that was pretty stellar. So they named me Stellar T, because my first name is Tom. Yeah. And eventually I just shortened it to Stellar.
Well, there are all reasons for having a trail name. I assumed it's because you're such a stellar hiker, because you recently completed the Appalachian Trail, but it was nowhere near your first hike, was it? And no. So let's quickly run through some of the trails you've done, and most of them in the last 2 or 3 years, aren't they?
Yes, all of them have been since 2018.
Right. What have you actually done then?
In chronological order.
That'd be impressive.
I soboed the PCT in 2018, and then in 2019 I hiked the Colorado Trail, and then I soboed the Arizona Trail, the AZT. Right. And then in 2020 I walked the Long Trail. Right. And then in 2021 I hiked the Grand Enchantment Trail in the spring. And then the Appalachian Trail, I just finished up this month.
That's a lot of hiking. It really is. So far, of the trails you've done, which is your favourite so far? And I know it's not the Appalachian Trail, by the
way. My favorite so far is probably the PCT. Not because it's my first, but just the open terrain, the mountains, just the views, constant views, except, of course, in Oregon and Northern California, where a lot of the views were smoke obscured.
Yeah, I've often kind of wondered, though, what it's like when you hike the AT first time, and if you love it, which I did, I then went out to try to do the John Muir Trail. Unfortunately, I couldn't do that, but I loved the views out there as well. I wonder what it's like to hike another one first, which is what you've done, and then hike the AT. Did the PCT spoil you for views then? Because I can imagine why it would do.
I mean, the PCT did spoil me for views. So did actually all the other trails that I've done, except for the long trail and the AT.
All right.
They're both green tunnels. But that being said, anytime you're out on the trail, that's better than anytime, most of the times that I'm at home. It's great to be out there. And, I probably would not walk the AT in its entirety again, but I certainly will come back and do sections.
All right. So tell us about, because I'd never heard of this the other day, the Grand Enchantment Trail. I mean, it's got the best name of all of them, by the way. Firstly, why is it enchanting? And tell us where it runs.
Yeah, so the Grand Enchantment Trail, it goes from, in the springtime, you walk it from Phoenix to Albuquerque. And, Phoenix or Arizona is the Grand Canyon state, and New Mexico is the land of enchantment. So that's where the Grand Enchantment Trail comes from.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Right.
So that's why it's named that way. And it's not truly a trail, it's a route. So it's a combination of other trails, dirt roads, and some cross-country travel. About 10% of it is cross-country travel, either through desert sage or canyons and such, where there is no trail.
So how do you find your way? You just literally set a point in the distance and walk towards it?
No, I mean, there's a bunch of different apps that you can use, GPS apps. And so I downloaded the GPX track onto my phone and followed that GPX track. At the same time, I also had printed maps for the trail.
All right.
The Grand Enchantment Trail is kind of the brainchild of a trail named Blister Free, or Brett Tucker. And he has a number of these lesser used trails out there. He's done the Grand Enchantment Trail. He's recently created and finished up the Mogollon Rim Trail. He's got the Sky Islands Traverse, and he's working, I don't think it's out there yet, the GPX track for it, but he's working on a northern New Mexico loop.
Wow.
All trails that I'm interested in. So that comes from a guy named Brett Tucker, and he's not the only one doing these, I'll call them non-gut hooks trails, if you will.
I know what you mean, yeah. So what's the attraction of a non-gut hooks trail as far as you're concerned then?
In the case of the Grand Enchantment Trail, I had originally planned to do the Hayduke Trail this spring, but with the change in administration and not sure what the administration was going to do to COVID relative to the national parks, because the Hayduke Trail goes through 6 or 7 national parks, my hiking partner and I had decided, let's do something that we don't have to access or go through national parks because they could be closed. Rather than doing all the planning for the Hayduke for this year, we decided to do the Grand Enchantment Trail. And as far as the attraction is concerned, these trails go, and it's not a trail, it's a route, but these routes takes you to, places, all awesome places that are out there. It's just a non-gut hooks trail. It's not as popular.
Right. And is that part of the main attraction? It's not as popular. You don't see so many people on there.
A little bit. That's part of the attraction, but the real attraction is just where you're at and the scenery that you're going through. That it happens to be a non-gut hooks trail. That it happens to be places that people don't frequent. I would call that a bonus.
Right.
So, but it's really the area of the country that you're walking through. So,
and if I'm right, you're now semi-retired. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you kind of work around your hikes. How do you manage this with work then?
Most of the work I do is either contract or I have some clients that are willing to put up with my schedule when they can, and they'll stack up work for me when I get back from the hikes.
Nice. So actually, funny enough, that fits in with something I was looking at this morning. I was looking at your Facebook page this morning, and it's full of, most of your posts say, started new job at Long Trail in September 2020.
Yeah.
And then it says, left job at Long Trail, October 2020.
Correct.
And while that made me smile, there seems to be something of that within you. You take on these hikes and immerse yourself in them. How do you look at each new hike? Is it fun, or does it feel a little bit like a job? What's it like for you?
It never feels like a job. Never feels like a job.
Well, you don't get paid for it, but yeah.
No, I enjoy. Yeah, never. I mean, that's just what Facebook has, or how Facebook puts it when you put on a new, I guess, a job or what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But that's Facebook, not me. I don't look at these as a job. I thoroughly enjoy all the trails. I enjoy preparing for the trails, often over preparing for the trails. So.
Well, I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute, about preparing for trails. So, but what is it doing for you? What do you obviously love the views. Is there a combination of things? Is there something you can articulate about what the trail is actually doing for you as a person?
I think it just, the trail itself just distills everything down to, a very, very simple life. I wake, I eat, I pack, I walk, I set up, go to sleep again, and do that day after day. It never gets boring. It never feels like a job.
Have you ever quit a trail without finishing it?
Never. Not yet.
No. And if you weren't enjoying it, you would, I presume, wouldn't you?
I think I would. I would now.
Yeah.
I think in my first trails, I would have just pushed through it. But if I didn't like a trail, and the one thing I've always heard is you never quit a trail on a bad day.
You never had a bad day. That can't be true.
I was thinking about that on the Appalachian Trail, just the trail I just recently completed, and I don't know of a bad day. Even days that I was pushing through in the rain all day, it just never felt bad. So.
And you seem to have something of a recurring theme, don't you? Because I was looking at your Instagram page and obviously your AT page, your Facebook page as well. Tell us about the Phoon, which I'd never heard of before you told me what it was the other day.
Yeah, the Phoon, Phoon. Yeah, the Phoon, it's a pose. It was really a meme. I think it was a meme that even came out before planking. Right. And it's really something that my family and I do. We're on vacation or something, we'll text each other pictures of each other Phooning, and it's just something I started doing on the trails, often at the beginning and the end, or you come up to a prominent viewpoint. But yeah, I'm single-handedly trying to bring back that meme. It's not working, but I've had some friends post or send me texts of them Phooning after we've done that together out on a hike or something.
Well, I'll doubtless put at least one Phoon in the show notes so people who don't know what it is can see it. But you're actually not the first one in your family to take on the AT, are you? I believe it was your wife who was actually your girlfriend at the time.
That's correct. So, in 1997, I had taken my girlfriend at the time for her first backpacking trip. We went out to Colorado. And she had brought a book with her called There Are Mountains to Climb. And it's about a woman who had a lot of life changes, including divorce, and in her 50s had quit her job to hike the Appalachian Trail. So in 1998, in the spring of 1998, my wife decided that she was going to quit her job, make a career change, and she was going to lash the Appalachian Trail. And that's what she did. She lashed the trail from starting in Virginia and went up to Maine. So you hadn't married her by then, so she was still just a girlfriend. So how do you feel about that, your wife just leaving you to going off to do a long ass section hike? Well, again, it wasn't my wife at the time, but I'd be happy if she does that again. I'd be happy for her, just like she's happy for me when I go out on these hikes. I actually proposed. I met her up at Katahdin when she finished, and I proposed to her on the top of Katahdin.
Oh, how cool is that?
Yeah,
there can't be very many places more romantic than the top of Katahdin, all hot and sweaty, both of you. There's still quite a climb, but it's very impressive.
Yeah, as part of her hiking preparation, I had learned about the PCT, and I just said, okay, you're hiking the Appalachian Trail. I'm supporting you. I'm sending you the boxes, and then one day I'm going to do the PCT. And,
right.
So that's what happened 20 years later.
So what was the delay? Was it because of work and stuff you couldn't get away?
Yeah, it was work. It was mainly work. Yeah, right. I intended to do this, after working a number of years. So.
Yeah. So let's look at your AT hike right now. You went sober as you did on the PCT and I think on the Arizona Trail, or I think
Correct.
So anyway. You've got concrete reasons why you like to hike sober. What are they? And did that work out well on the AT as well?
Yeah, I mean, so for the PCT and the AT, not the Arizona Trail, that was just timing. But for the PCT and the AT, going sober, in my opinion, has some advantages. Weather, generally, you'll have better weather on the AT going sober. I didn't have to deal with snow and whatnot in the Smokies if I did an early Novo start. Less bugs. And certainly less people. I'm not competing for resources, tent sites, town resources, and such like you would at the beginning of the AT on a Novo hike. So those are the key reasons: just less people, better weather in general, and less bugs.
I must say that when I was doing my AT hikes, I remember going down the north side of some of those mountains, particularly in Maine, I think it was. When I was thinking, I would never like to be climbing up this, going the other way. There's some pretty sharp climbs in Maine, aren't there? Certainly on the north side of the mountains.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no switchbacks in Maine or New Hampshire. They're all just vertical connectors. Yeah,
it's a bit of a shock, isn't it? Especially as it's the beginning of your hike as well. That's the bit I always find so difficult. But you started, I believe, in July, but you wanted to start a little bit earlier than that, didn't you? But you had an issue with the permit?
I wanted to start later.
Okay. I got that totally wrong then. So
I started July 28th. The goal originally was to start sometime in mid-August, but between July 28th and somewhere in the 20th of August, there were no Baxter permits available. So I ended up starting earlier. And the reason I wanted to start later in part was my wife is a school teacher, and she was going to start going back to school and teaching or prepping for teaching in the middle of August. So I wanted to delay my time until then, but I couldn't get any permits. Had I known then what I knew now, I could have started later, and I could have gone up to the AT Lodge and hung out, because a number of hikers would have come through with space on their permits, and I could have just piggybacked with them.
Yeah, but you learn stuff like that on the way, don't you?
Yeah,
When you start, you know nothing, and then you accumulate days and days of walking, and it seems to give you, almost by osmosis, you learn how to do stuff, don't you?
That's correct, yeah.
So, I think the AT only took you just over 3 months, was it? Something like that?
Yeah, 99 days.
100 days, so. 99 days. Yeah. Does your pace mitigate you spending any real time with other people, or is it, I know you prefer actually to be pretty much by yourself a lot on the trail. You're doing so many miles every day, I presume, aren't you?
Yeah, I basically walked through most of the Sobos hiking. Although I did meet some people and walk with them for quite a ways that had similar schedules, similar paces. So.
Right. And with so many trails now under your belt, you've got quite an interesting take on what a lot of us refer to as post-trail depression. It's a difficult thing to define. Tell us about what you've read. You've read stuff about this, haven't you? And you refer to somebody, Dr. Ann Baker, I think her name was, I've written down.
Yeah, I listened to it on another podcast, and Dr. Ann Baker, rather than referring this as true depression, refers to it, I think, more as grief or a loss or possibly a breakup. So, and I can relate to that more. Getting off the trail, it's more of a a breakup in that, you're longing to still be on the trail and people that are still on the trail. So I think of it a little bit more as a breakup as opposed to depression. That being said, I truly don't have experience with depression in the formal definition of it.
But how do you kick the grief then? What do? You go on another trail, I suppose, don't you? Now think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm already prepping for other trails. And,
of course you are.
Yeah. I'm already doing some of the homework for some other trails, and then maybe looking at what I can do between now and March of next year, just to get out there somewhere for a week. I'm looking at that now, and I'm also doing a little bit work back to getting into that groove now as well.
Does your wife no longer hike then? She's not that interested in hiking anymore?
Oh, no. She absolutely is interested in hiking. Right. We do backpack together, but we probably will never through hike together. So, and I'm just, the backpacking, I'm thinking more of you have a destination, maybe it's a lake or a view, you set up camp. You hang out there. I bring my camera and my tripod, take pictures, and so I look at backpacking more like that. Through hiking's a little bit more, at least the way I like to do it. I'm hiking from sun up to sundown. So
it's worth pointing out to people, by the way, that you're not a kid. You're 59 years of age, so it's not as if, it's not as if you're you're in the first flush of youth. So how do you prepare for these things? And this is what I'd like to really talk to you about more about today, is about preparation and what you do. Because I'm sure there are people here who think, well, crikey, he's done all these hikes, and yet he's a 59-year-old guy. and a lot of our audience are in that age bracket as well. You're knocking out these trails pretty quick, very quickly, in fact, and very efficiently, obviously. How do you prepare for a long distance hike? And is it physical and mental, or is the mental thing dialed in already?
Yeah, I'd say it's not mental. I think any preparation is really physical. I guess the mental part is just making sure, like everybody else has to do, making sure that everything you need to do at home is done before you leave. But beyond that, or you can take care of it on the trail. But beyond that, it's really not mental. But I do train for the hikes. I try to stay in good physical condition year round. That's something I was doing before hiking, and it's just something I'm continuing to do.
You're ex-Army, aren't you?
I am.
Army?
Yeah.
And so when you left the Army, did you always stay in shape?
I did, yes.
Right. There's a discipline there you had already. So how would you advise somebody to, what do you use? Do you do running? You use steps? You use gym? What do you use?
Yeah, I do all of those. And I'm also a cyclist. So I used to race bikes before I actually started the long distance trails, and I still keep active with the cycling. But yeah, certainly I do go to the gym. I do run. But before I go on a trail, often I just get out there and I'm walking in some of the local parks with my backpack on. Right. So a lot of it's just walking. So, and I think most of it's walking if you can get onto a trail where the tread's uneven, unlike a sidewalk where the trail's uneven, that's going to strengthen your legs, your feet, your ankles, and just get out there. And if you're getting, so I'm definitely not a couch to trail person, and I don't foresee myself ever being a couch to trail person. And even on and part of it's personality, if someone wants me to do a fun run, well, I'm going to train for that fun run,
oh, wow.
So yeah, wow. So yeah.
There's a certain intensity about you then, I should think.
It's just, if I'm going to do it, I kind of, I want to do it well. But even like some backpacking, we go out for a backpacking trip or something, and if I haven't been hiking for a while, I'll still put my backpack on, I'll load it up, it's as much to, make sure everything fits and the gear is right, as much for that as it is for the training aspect. Because if we're going to spend, I live in northern Ohio, so we have to travel, we have to travel to go to what I think are interesting places to backpack. Right. So if we're going to travel and go that far, I don't want to have an injury while I'm in Colorado or Utah or some other place, even if it's on a backpacking trip. So,
well, listeners to the show know that I am very much a couch to trail kind of guy, and there is no question about it. That is not the way forward. Don't do as I do. Do as my guest says. I think if you probably give yourself so much more of an advantage being physically ready for something. I must say, when I tried to do the John Muir Trail this year, I prepared pretty well. I thought, I was climbing with a backpack, the whole 9 yards, but really, it just kicked my ass. And when I did the AT twice, I literally got off my arse and got on the trail. Nothing else in the interim. And I struggled for the first 200 or 300 miles to get my legs, but then I eventually got them. But you're also, having done all these trails, do you find yourself preparing pretty much the same way each time? Or did you learn so much from your first through hike on the PCT that you start adapting things or adopting things for your other hikes?
Well, I think it depends on the trail. So, certainly for the Grand Enchantment Trail, being much more obscure, a lot less information out there about it, I did a whole lot more preparation for that. Right. The Appalachian Trail, in general, I didn't do much preparation at all. I was looking the distance between the towns and trying to figure out food carries and stuff, and checking out the towns where I could pick up food. But once I did that, and realizing that there's a lot of places to get food on the Appalachian Trail, and most of those places are rarely more than 4 days away.
In your pace, probably about 2 days away tops in most cases.
It depends. And that's one of the advantages of walking fast. I can reduce my food carries. But so for the Appalachian Trail, I did very little prep in terms of resupply. The same with the long trail. I didn't do too much prep with regards to resupply. However, the other trails that I've done, I prepped quite a bit, especially my first one, the PCT, and then the Grand Enchantment Trail. And, I kind of want to do some of these more obscure, less traveled routes, focus on that in the future. And so in all those cases, I'll certainly be doing a lot more trail prep.
But you must have noticed the difference in the beautifully groomed trails. That's the PCT in a lot of places is pretty nicely groomed, yes. And then you come to Pennsylvania where every step is on the angle of a rock and so on. How did you cope with that? Was that just another part of hiking for you?
Of course, Rocksylvania is famous, and I knew it was coming. It was a little different than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be bigger rocks that I could hop, skip, and jump over, not these small, changing variable angle rocks that you just had to keep your eyes on the trail for the whole time you're hiking it. So some of the other trails, certainly the Grand Enchantment Trail, when you're actually on a trail, a lot of those trails hadn't been maintained for probably decades.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of route finding in there, and you're walking through brambles and stickers and wait a minute vines and stuff like that. So, so Rocksylvania, or Pennsylvania, northern Pennsylvania specifically. I felt the rocks. Everybody feels those rocks. Everyone knows they're coming.
I've got to tell you, I'm thinking to myself, good. Glad you did. I'm thinking, good. I'm glad you did feel the rocks.
Oh, absolutely.
You seem to be knocking out the trails quite comfortably, and and I loved the fact that anybody can do it so easily. But it's quite a. I always found Pennsylvania both times to be extraordinarily difficult on my feet. And really smashed my shoes up both times.
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely felt the rocks of PA. And, you can feel those rocks all the way into Maryland.
Yes.
So
they don't suddenly stop, do they?
No, they really. It's like, I hear they get better. It's like when. So, and certainly Maine and New Hampshire were quite difficult as well. Just
especially as a start, isn't it? Yeah. Now, you're also a bit of which really surprised me today, you're a bit of a tinkerer with your equipment, aren't you? Tell us about cutting things off your pack.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so for this trail and in the other trails, I just found out I wasn't, I carry a Hyperlight Mountain Gear 2400 is what my pack is. And I just wasn't using the hip belt much Even on the Grand Enchantment Trail with some of the heavier water carries, there was a lot longer water carries and food carries. I just wasn't using the hip belt much. And it really, especially when it's cinched on my hips specifically, it impedes the forward motion of my legs and it just doesn't feel comfortable. So what I did for this trail is I cut off my hip belt and I sewed a 1-inch loop for a hip belt so that I could use a light AF hip belt if I wanted to use it. So I cut that off. I took the metal stays out of the HMG pack and replaced it with some thinner metal stays. And then I cut all the stuff off that I don't use, the pouch or inside the pouch for the water bladder, stuff like that. So it was nice because I was able to get the pack weight from an empty 30 ounces and I got it down to 23 ounces.
Gee.
And more importantly, it's just more useful.
And it's all about getting the weight down, obviously, because the less weight you carry, the easier it's going to be. Do you think there's a bit of a balancing act these days between lightweight gear and durable gear? Because they must be getting almost too light, some of these things, aren't they?
So this pack has almost 5,000 miles on it.
Wow.
My tent that I'm carrying is almost the same amount. My sleeping bag has almost got 5,000 miles.
Wow.
So I'm not sure. My experience, I've got a hiking partner that I've hiked with that's put almost double that on their gear, just because they're taking care of the gear. So I would say, tent, your tent location, where your site location is, all that is important as well. But no, I think the gear, as long as you take care of it, what you're not going to see me do is, come to a shelter or a tent site, stop, take off my pack and drop it on the ground. That's just not going to happen.
Right. Yeah, look after it. Yeah, don't mind.
No,
yeah.
but I saw it a lot. Or you're not going to see me drop it on the ground and sit on my pack either, So.
Are you somebody who only takes exactly what you need, or do you carry the odd luxury item as well then?
Let's see. I carried, from a luxury item, I do carry one of the Sea to Summit silicone collapsible cups. And I do cook. Love my coffee in the morning, so yes. I definitely cook. Beyond that, not too many luxuries.
Have you tried hammocking, by the way? You mentioned it. I didn't know whether you were a tent or a hammocker, but I heard you just now mention a tent. Have you tried staying in a hammock?
No, I've not tried to stay in a hammock. When I sleep on my back, I snore pretty hard, and nobody needs to hear that.
Nobody needs to hear that, right?
Yeah.
And you've already mentioned about resupply, especially on the AT and so on. What about the resupply where you've got a longer distance between resupply? Do you ever get yourself deliveries, or do you always try to get into a town?
It's a balancing act. That's part of the research. So I'll see what that town offers. Some of the, towns are just nothing more than a convenience store. So certainly in those kinds of towns, I'll send myself a box. So. And
if you could give, you've got this experience now over a relatively short period of time, which has allowed you to dial yourself in, and you've got in the mode of hiking, I guess. If there's one tip, because a lot of new hikers listen to the show, so if you could give one tip for new hikers, what do you think that would be?
Well, for a brand new hiker, even on this trail, even section hikers, especially, and I guess it's a tip as much as anything for older hikers, there's a lot of good information out there with regards to, getting your pack weight down. And what I did, I took the normal path that most people do is, I gradually, with gear replacement over time, got my pack weight down. So my pack weight, coming from the military, I had everything in the kitchen sink.
Yes.
And then in helping my wife prepare for the Appalachian Trail, we started dropping a lot of weight, reading the Pacific Crest Trail thru-hiker, or I think that was the name of the book by Ray Jardine. Okay. We didn't take it to his level, but just over time, I've slowly, every year, every 2 years, when we go out on a bigger trip, try to pick something and drop the weight. There's so much good information out there now that you don't have to take that relatively expensive evolution. You can, find somebody that's out there that you respect in terms of, one of the trail celebrities that are out there that you respect. And
great expression, by the way.
Yeah, what's that?
Great expression. I know what you mean.
Yeah. It's not mine. Yeah, but yeah, you go find somebody out there and look at their gear lists, and then maybe start trying to emulate that. Not necessarily with their specific equipment, especially on backpacks because they're fit specific, but with all the awesome cottage manufacturers that we have in the U.S. Often you can call them up, maybe buy the pack, and then if you return it in the same shape, you can at least test it before you buy.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. It is. That's what I did with my pack. I hiked the PCT with the ULA. I tried a couple different ULA packs, and then I moved to the HMG for my other trails. And when I tested the HMG, I tested a Katabatic Ani and Superior Wilderness Designs pack at the same time. Bought them all, tested them, and sent 2 of them back. Testing is, putting all my gear in it and just walking the local trail.
Sure.
But sent them all back. So I was out the cost of shipping, but I had a pack that was going to fit me. And I wasn't going to, get on the trail. If you're starting Nobo on the AT, buying a new pack at Neal's Gap. If you're starting Sobo, buying a new pack at Shaw's. I didn't have to do that. I was ready. So do the prep work, find somebody with a nice gear list that you respect, and take a look at that. And the second thing that kind of goes along with that is the best way to cut weight is not to bring something. So, so many people have extra clothes and all kinds of, So if you're really interested in the thru hike, you need to look at cutting the weight.
Yeah, it's the biggest, it's the easiest way to give yourself the best chance of success, isn't it? And my pack when I went second time was 15 pounds lighter than when I went first time.
That's huge.
Which shows you how much crap I took with me first time, really.
Yeah.
And lastly, so with so many hikes in recent years, is there a game plan behind this? Will you do the CDT, for example, or are you just, as you see fit, you'll just see different places you want to hike?
Oh, I mean, you for as far as the Triple Crown, you do 1 or 3, right? You can't just stop at 2.
Well, there you go. So, that was really the point of the question.
Yeah. So the CDT is absolutely on the list. Yeah, but again, some of the other trails. I mean, I'm planning to do the Hayduke, the Oregon Desert Trail. I plan to do the Oregon Desert Trail actually this spring after walking the Grand Enchantment Trail. But I saw some water reports indicating that water sources that were normally running in June and July were already drying up in April. Wow. And I just wasn't planned or prepared while I'm hiking on the Grand Enchantment Trail. I wasn't prepared to determine what places I needed to cache water on the Oregon Desert Trail. So I canceled that trip. And but that certainly is on the list. The Pacific Northwest Trail. I mean, there's just so much out there. So
America
much good walking.
is so blessed with so many great places to walk, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's remarkable how many trails there are out there. So, bless you. Well, look, I really appreciate you come give us the benefit of your expertise. We don't normally have people who've done so much and are so prepared with what they do. And I thought I'd try to make it more about how you prepare for these things and what you do. And just thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you very much, Steve.
Okay, man. Take it easy, okay?
Take care. Thanks.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
He's quite the overachiever, isn't he? And I thought it was particularly interesting how he seeks out more obscure places to hike. I'm sure it won't be too long before he gets that Triple Crown under his belt. And I decided to pick his brain for a few tips because I'm sure his experience and general knowledge about hiking long trails will be helpful as some of you are planning your own thru hikes next year. I must say, cutting bits off an expensive pack isn't anything I'm going to be doing in the near future, but his straightforward common sense on the subject I'm sure will be helpful to many of you. Moving on, thanks this week goes to our wonderful donors, without whom we would not have a show. So hats off to our monthly donors this week, who are Todd Withrow, Suzanne Johnson, John Cratler, while Randall Accra also gave a very generous donation this week. So thanks, as ever, go to you all. Remember, for the cost of a coffee or two a month, you can become a producer of our shows, donating through our website, hikingradionetwork.com, where you'll find an indecent amount of donate buttons. Cheers all. Now, something I never intended to do. As many of you know, I failed miserably on my third John Muir Trail attempt this summer. The only good thing about it, I was able to share my misery with my dear friend Julie, along with her friends Paddy and Denise. But it was Julie and I who chucked in the towel at the end of an excruciating day that ended at Red's Meadow. Many of you have seen the live Facebook post that we made from Red's, but today I'm sharing a conversation that I had with Julie just last night. It was really the first time we've been able to have an extended conversation about this kind of blot on our year. Here's a reflective Julie and yours truly. My dear friend Jester is on today. Hey Jester, how are you?
Hey Mighty Blue, good to be back on the show.
This is one of those things, I was never going to do this. I never wanted to talk about it, but people have been writing to me recently saying, we didn't talk much about the John Muir Trail hike apart from that super sad recording and Facebook Live that we did at the Red's Meadow. I think enough time has passed where the grief and the sadness should have dissipated. It actually hasn't in my case.
Me neither. But, if I'm telling the truth, Mighty Blue, me neither. And that was so raw of a moment because I've gone back and watched that a couple times, and we were really raw in that video, in that live.
Yeah, I didn't feel very alive, I've got to tell you. And there's a bit of a clue, by the way. I don't know if I've told people this. I was so pissed off that day that I knew this is it. I'm never going to have a chance to do anything like this again. I can't do elevation. And I went into the shop at Red's Meadow, and there was a young man there. I don't know how we got into the subject, actually, but I gave him my bear can. That's right. He said he was going to do the John Muir Trail. I said, you can have my bear can. I'm never going to need it again as long as I live. So I gave him a $120 bear can. It was the most expensive I could buy.
So and that was sad. When you told me you did that, I was sad.
Yeah. I was sad when I did it. The sadness is strange. And so, funnily enough, I didn't really prepare much for today because we're just having a conversation as friends, just other people maybe listening, hopefully. and I had a chat with my girlfriend, Dana, to ask what her impression was of what I was like. And she said, when I got home, I was disappointed. I was depressed for at least 2 weeks. She mentioned the word, I was crushed. And she talked about one. I mean, it came to my mind as a pathetic image in my head of me looking at my Katahdin pictures, my two summits of Katahdin, just looking at them kind of soulfully, just looking at these pictures, thinking, I can't ever do it again. And she said that you weren't yourself for a couple of months and you were sad and the light went out of me. So she's just explained to me before I came into the recording to say, she wasn't criticising me for that. It's just it's just how I was. So now you know how I felt at the time. How were you at that time, those first couple of weeks after?
Well, another thing we haven't really explained is, so we had our live session and, we were grieving our decision to make, to get off the trail because of altitude and, our bodies were just not working. And so there was grief then, and then what we had to do to get home, that whole next day was just an ordeal from the time we got up until, until we flew home. And I mean, really for both of us, I think we wanted to go home so we could either just get immediately out of the situation is what I felt like. The sooner I get out of this, the better I'll feel. And I will say, I'm happy with our decision. At the time, our mind frame, hindsight's 20/20. You can always go back, and say we woulda, coulda, shoulda. But I remember when you and I first talked, it was maybe a week or two afterwards, you called me and both of us, we were just, I think we really depression, like post-trail depression. And I was disappointed in myself. That I felt like I just couldn't, I don't know why I couldn't complete the John Muir Trail. It just blew me away that my body just said, no, we're not doing this. So I don't know. And Stephanie said that I was just like a mummy, man.
That's nice, isn't it?
I know, it's really nice. Just going through motions, just making up things for me to do myself to get my mind off of it.
And you had to go back to work straight away, didn't you? Which is actually one of the stories of the hike. We set ourselves a tough task because you were going back to work on that Monday, weren't you?
Yes.
After we were supposed to have finished. So
yes.
You had about another 2 or 3 weeks off, which you didn't need to worry about. So we set ourselves a tough task by taking on Eric the Black's version of a 17-day hike of the JMT. And that proved to be way beyond us, didn't it?
It was beyond, yes. And that was disappointing because, it's easy. I shouldn't say it's easy, but a 12 or 15 mile day on the Appalachian Trail does not equate to a 12 or 15 mile day on the John Muir Trail.
No, not at all.
Not at all. And I guess for some reason, and I've been to Yosemite before and, been to altitude, and I don't know. I said something the other day, and I think this is what made me the saddest. And you said this when we were out there, and I don't know if it's disturbing is the right word, but we were in so much disarray, agony, whatever you want to say. We couldn't appreciate where we were. I couldn't appreciate where we were. I look at the pictures and I don't even believe I was there.
You were. I saw how miserable you were as well. Let's step back a bit. Let's go back to because when we got there, it was a happy time, wasn't it?
Yes.
We were the two ladies, your two friends, or our two friends who were hiking with us. They were happy. We were happy. We got to the campground and we set up our tent. And you got this great picture of me sitting on my. Was it 2 ounce chair, whatever it was?
That chair was awesome.
That light chair. I mean, my fat ass just about got in it at the time, and we were just excited, weren't we? We were ready to go. We thought this is the thing, and I hadn't realised this until today. I went back to look at the app I use to record when I'm hiking, and I recorded day -1. Day -2 and day -3 while we were preparing, being in Reno and going down there and getting ready to go the first day. I didn't do a single recording when we were on the trail. And for me to be a podcaster and not doing a recording pretty much says how I was feeling about it straight away. It was too much darn bother. So do you remember that first day when we got hit by the rain?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
you described that first day. It was tough.
Oh my God. So yeah, that first day, it seemed like a good itinerary to have. I think we were going to try to do maybe 12 or 13 miles that first day. It was relatively flat, open hiking. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. Walking over bridges and lots of water. And, we sat and had a nice lunch and just going through gorgeous meadows. And I knew the next day was going to be, the first major pass. So in my mind, Donahue Pass,
yeah.
Hey, if we get through this first day, and then I don't know, I feel like we turned a corner and then it just opened the floodgates. It's just wide open, rain pouring. And it was a deluge or a deluge. It was unbelievable. And we were just trying to find a place to camp and get in our tents because we were getting soaked. Soaked to the bone.
And when you do that, you get colder and colder and colder very, very quickly, don't you?
Yeah.
And yet, funnily enough, when we then set up our tents, everything was soaked. I started laughing, really. I thought, that was funny, really. You can dry yourself off. You get in your sleeping bag. And I always remember this from the AT as well. When you're wet and cold, you can soon warm up once you're in your sleeping bag, can't you? And we did that, but the rain was pouring all around us. And it was, I don't know when it was about 2 p.m, something like that, 3?
It was. We were in our tents by 2. And I don't think any of it, we were like, I was a distance away from, not far. I could still see your tent. I was closest to one of the gals, Denise, and we were talking very loud to even hear each other. She and I were the closest. That's how heavy the rain was. Yeah. And I remember at one point thinking, okay, I'm going to need to get up and use the restroom. So I put on all my rain gear and I walked over to Patty and I said, hey, is everything okay? And Patty's like, I'm just wiping everything down. There's water coming in. I didn't get my tent set up right. So she had to actually get out and kind of redo her guidelines to make sure, water wasn't coming underneath. And I went down to you and you were like, oh, I don't know. I mean, literally, I just remember you saying, I think I'm in water, but it's going to be okay. I'm going to fix it. I said, all right, sounds good. And I turned around and went back to my tent and we didn't talk, none of us, because it just rained the whole rest of the night.
And we got up about 6 in the morning. So we were in our tents for about 18 hours, weren't we? Something like that.
It was ridiculous. Awful. It was awful. And I remember Steve was like, I need 2 hours to get ready in the morning. So we were like, all right, well, if we want to leave by 6 or 7, because we're going up over Donahue Pass, we had all agreed, what time to get up. And even the next morning, it was like, oh my God, I'm so stiff for being in this tent. I mean, but I will say the altitude or whatever was going to happen hadn't happened to me yet. I felt fine, except we were just laying there.
Well, funnily enough, I'm not so sure, and I've said this in the past to people, even though I say I can't do altitude. I think you were affected more by the altitude than I was. I was just exhausted. You were exhausted as well, but
yeah.
You clearly, I knew you were affected more by it because when we actually got off Reds Meadow, we got back down to Mammoth Lakes, which was about 8,800. You were still struggling with your breathing then, weren't you?
Yeah, really struggling. And I will say, I cannot thank you enough that day. You really did help me. Like you guys, Mighty Blues carried his pack, my pack. I just couldn't have anything on my chest because all of a sudden it was just like, so much pressure, like an elephant was sitting there. And then I was getting sick, running into this bike shop, using the back. I mean, it was, we were on 2 or 3 different buses. And then our ride back to Reno in and of itself.
And then Reno, we're telling about that. We found a young guy who said, I think my girlfriend might be able to run you back to Reno. So gave us a price. We were quoted $500 by cab from Mammoth Lakes to Reno, which I thought was price gouging.
Yeah.
We ended up paying about $300, I think it was, or $250, something like that, to this young couple, and they were lovely. They were we chatted all the way, didn't we? And it was just great.
Yeah.
And then we got to Reno. I'd found a place and booked it. I'm not going to say the name of the hotel, but I found a place and booked it. And Julie said, I'm not staying here. This is horrible. Let's find somewhere else. And
well, listen, you guys, we pull up and there's police and they closed the door and said, hey, we got to go see if we got your rooms clean. I was like, no.
Yeah, so we went somewhere else and it was okay. It was
fine.
So on reflection, thinking back to this whole thing, two things that stick in my mind. I think you and I, on the last day, because the girls went ahead to Reds Meadow to get the cabin that we were going to stay at, I think the two of us almost gave each other permission to give up. And I've often wondered since then, and I shouldn't wonder about it, because it was a 17-mile day, wasn't it? And that last 7 miles downhill was purgatory for me. I'm sure it was for you as well.
Yeah.
I feel that we gave each other permission to give up then. And I'm not entirely sure that it was the altitude for me. It was just the impact upon my body of the work I was doing and my legs and stuff like that. I just don't think I was up to it that particular time, and maybe I'll never be up to it because, as you know, I'm going to try to do this TSX challenge next year, which will take me up the top of Mount Whitney, hopefully, and over the top. So I'm going to have to go to elevation again. And I've actually got, I think Steph sent me two of those hiker medals, one of which was Mount Whitney. So I'm actually going to wear that next year.
Awesome.
Because I think I can do it. So looking back, do you think you're going to do it again or not?
You know, when we first got back, I didn't think so. I was like, nope, I'm an East Coast hiker. You know, I'm an Appalachian hiker, no matter, I love the Appalachians. And, just like you, I've often thought, we're hikers. Somewhere in our mind, why didn't we say, okay, we're going to take tomorrow off and we're going to spend the whole day thinking about what we need to do. You know, we're problem solvers. Do we, take the day off, think about what we need to do, reassess our schedule? And I think for me, we got caught up on the food. Like, we can't alter the schedule because we have food drops and things like that.
Yes.
And I think that's just me in my mind playing out scenarios that I probably shouldn't do, because that's not good. Because, we can't go back. We can't change our minds. We can't change what we did.
Sure.
It is what it is. It makes me sad because I truly wanted to do the John Muir Trail with you. It was an honor that you asked me to go. And I don't like failing. I like completing, what we set out to do, but that's part of hiking.
But you said I've said to you rather in the past that I don't regard myself as a hiker. I regard myself more as a through hiker. And so not to complete a through hike is anathema to me. And the fact that I've not completed this run after 3 days three times rather, is awful. And yet it's still in my mind. I want that picture at the top of bloody Mount Whitney. And I hope if I ever get it, it's not disappointing. If I found next
it's
year,
not going to be disappointing.
If I found next year, I might hire a helicopter and get myself dropped off on the top there for 5 minutes. Oh dear! So this is the first time we've been able to really talk about it, because it's been, joking aside, it has been tough to take this for us, and people are going to think, oh, what a pair of wusses. But if you feel so strongly about it, it means a lot. It means a lot to me to get that thing. And I can tell it means a lot because this is the first podcast episode I've ever recorded with a glass of wine in my hand, which is going down quite fast. So that's how much it means.
Well, listen, as you take your sip of wine there, like I said, overall, you can, we can sit there and think about, what we should have done or what we maybe could have done. And I just, I wish I just had more. I was really looking forward to spending time with you. We podcast and, we talk about hiking, but to go out and hike, with the producer of the network and you and I get to know each other. And, the icing on the cake would have been Mount Whitney. Yeah. I feel like that's what I missed. I missed the additional weeks. We had 3 days. Yeah. And when I got home, I said, oh my God, I had this feeling like, is Steve going to want to hike with me again? Am I a bad hiker? Am I a bad hiker? Like, am I?
No, not at all. And in fact, funny enough, the other thing I've thought about, if the girls had gone on, and they did, obviously, to Res Meadow, they left us behind because we asked them to just to get this right.
Yes. We all talked about it.
They were stronger than us. And so the two of us hiked together, sat down and talked for about an hour at lunch. And then we realized we should probably stop. If it had just been me, or if it had just been you, say it was just you then, do you think you probably would have tried to go on a bit further, or what do you think you would have done?
That's a tough question, Steve. I think if it was just me and I was by myself, I may have taken a day or two off and tried to figure out what was going on. Is it me? Do I just need to sit here at Reds Meadows and try to acclimate? Do I need to, take a day or two and figure out my food and maybe have it sent to some different places? I feel like if I was by myself, and that's probably it's probably what I would have done, because we had the time.
Yes.
But we couldn't think like that. And Stephanie keeps telling me, you can't think like that because your mind is clear now. You're not in it. You guys were in it and you did what you had to do in the moment, and you can't.
We were scrambled, weren't we?
Yeah.
Our heads were, certainly my head was scrambled. So, yeah, you're right. And she's absolutely correct there, because I wasn't thinking straight. And when we sat down, and I looked at that film of us on Facebook as well, we looked like we're two deer caught in headlights, don't we? Oh dear, nightmare, absolute nightmare. Well, look, Julie, I wanted to talk to you about this, and we haven't really, because I just want people to realise we're two adults who've done some hiking, done some quite good distance, and we were really devastated this year Perhaps people say, oh, just get over it, It's easy enough to say that, but when you've really wanted to do something and you are disappointed, we were disappointed. And the fact is we were disappointed in ourselves, rather. So, and I'm just hopeful that I get the chance one day to get the top of Whitney. You, of course, have got many more years than me, so you're a lot younger than me, so you've got plenty of time to do it. But I will never forget those 3 days, those four or 5 days we were together. It was great to share the time with you anyway, and just sad it didn't work out in the end, didn't it?
I know. And here we are. We can't leave on a sad note, Steve.
Well, the happy note is that we're doing well on the network, and your show's going from strength to strength, which I love. My show's still doing okay, and
you're doing more than okay.
We're doing great. We're doing great, and we got a new podcast as well. So it's that with Courtney, Hiking Unfiltered. So we're doing pretty good, and I'm so glad that we're making these memories together, because it is fun spending time with you and just seeing you here as well. So, we're definitely going to talk again soon, all right?
Yes.
I'll speak to you
Steve.
Soon. Okay. Cheers then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, I hope that at least that gave some of you the answers you were hoping for. And as I said, I don't want to come across as a wuss about this, but I'm sure many of you can recognise that disappointment and, at the very least, empathise with us. We're all human beings, and it sometimes takes us longer to be able to talk about stuff that's troubling us. I'm glad we had that chance yesterday. But that wasn't the end, because talking about Whitney must have motivated Julie more than a little bit. This morning, and I'm recording this on the Wednesday before the publication of this episode, Julie booked herself on the TSX Challenge trip that Dana and I are taking with Chris Casado next summer. And Michelle Brown, a listener and a friend from our Woods Hole weekend last year, has also booked to go with us. And I believe another listener has booked, though he didn't know that I was going on that date. About that. Whitney, here we come. Now, about this middle section of the show, I've been thinking about it for some time, but funnily enough, I've just decided what to do with it. I did consider bringing back one of the old sections. I'm not sure if you remember it, but it was
Fear and Loathing on the Appalachian Trail.
But then I thought that it may be interesting to some of you to hear from some of the 2022 hopefuls. I've been in contact over the months with a guy, Chuck Hayes, who's starting his AT hike on New Year's Day. Naturally, I want to know why. So Chuck is my kind of guinea pig, and we'll see how it goes. He's going to be on next week. But please, write to me, steve@hikingradionetwork.com, and if you're starting in 2022, come on the show, tell us how you're preparing, tell us what you're looking forward to, all those sort of things. I hope to hear from you. And I just wanted to thank many of you who listened to the show last week and who gave our new podcast, Hiking Unfiltered, a listen. I told Courtney, who's the host of the podcast, that she had 99 downloads the day her second episode came out. Looking at my records, I discovered that it was 6 shows and 51 days before I passed a total of 99 downloads. So well done, Courtney. However, that speaks to a bigger point that I'd like to make. As you know, I'm offering any of you who'd like their own hiking podcast under the Hiking Radio Network banner to contact me. Basically, I take control of everything other than your show's content, and within our network, you get unmatched exposure for a new hiking show. It isn't free, but if you can develop an audience, then you get to keep all of the sponsorship money that comes to you. So please think about it and feel free to have a chat with me. I can be reached at steve@hikingradionetwork.com. I look forward to you joining our network. Finally today, and I apologise for rambling on a bit, Winton Porter meets a young man who's been living on the trail for some days and was confronted by a snake. Winton's intervention turns out to be very timely indeed. I'll see you next week. Chapter 14. The Lady's Slipper Killer. Excuse me, sir. Sir, excuse me. I was wondering if you could answer a question for me about this flower. Billy and I are passing time on the porch when the woman strolls up, blossom in hand. I'd guess she's in her early 40s, but I can't help but notice her perky breasts beneath her form-fitting top. Her cheeks, lips and forehead also look to be fresh from a little touch-up, compliments of the plastic surgeon. The skin seems a little too firm and a little too smooth, stretched over her bones like the plastic packaging of cheap cheese. Her attire, complete with a multi-pocket jungle vest from some glossy catalogue, is outdoor wear only in the sense that it looks good on models posed next to trees. Hiding behind Mum are two boys, about 5 and 7, waiting for the answer about the treasure they have found. The woman hands me the torn carcass of one of the rarest and most exquisite creatures in these woods, and Billy and I can't miss the contrast between the flower's natural beauty and her store-bought version. Billy, next to me, sees the dead thing and sucks a gasp of shock through his teeth. It's a pink lady's slipper, I tell her. Some, like me, call it a moccasin flower. Cypripedium acoli is a terrestrial orchid that grows in these mountains that surround my house. The plant has 2 wide basal leaves and a single green stalk growing to about a foot high. In late spring it bears a pink flower that looks like a slipper. Transplanting the moccasin from the wild is strongly discouraged because the chance of survival is almost nil. Besides which, harvesting the plant in a national forest is illegal, and she got this one from the side of our highway that is clearly part of the Chattahoochee National Forest. The woman turns and kneels down next to the children and shows them the corpse, already growing pale and slack, and gets it almost right in her childlike voice. Well, boys, there you have it. It's called a pink moccasin slipper. Isn't it pretty? I tell her it was prettier before she killed it. After the woman and her sons leave, Alpine comes bouncing up the stairs and runs over to where Billy and I are standing. There is nervous excitement in his voice. He seems to be having trouble gathering his thoughts. We're not even sure at first whether he's talking to us or to himself. I don't know what it is about this place, he says. There's something special. I don't know what. Every time I come here, it's like all the burdens of the world have been lifted off my shoulders. It's spiritual. I tell you, it's spiritual, man. Thanks for letting me come back, Winton. I already know this is the place where I'm supposed to be. What have you been smoking? Damn. I told you not to do that stuff when you're working. The man's talking about love. Billy sings the last word in a swooping falsetto. That's right, Alpine says. He looks about as serious as I've ever seen him. Jennifer. She's the one. I know it. I just know it. I remind him that he's known her only 3 days. 3.5, he says. She likes to do nearly everything I like to do. Hike, climb, mountain bike, surf. We're already talking about doing a southbound thru-hike this year. What about John? Alpine is quiet for a moment. He bends down and gives Sky a rub behind the ears. Well, she'd been looking to get away from him for a while. She's trying to figure out how to tell him. Things between them have been pretty rough. And what about you not wanting to get involved in a relationship right now? Remember? Sit back and enjoy life. This is different. Come on, dude. Give me a break. Yeah, dude. Chucking me in the shoulder. Give the boy a break. The ink on those divorce papers has had plenty of time to dry by now. We're talking about love here. This is about nature, springtime. We're animals, you know. This is about chemical reactions, pheromones. Sergeant, are you blushing? Thanks, Billy. I knew you would understand, Alpine says, shoving his hands into his pockets. But actually, we're taking things slow. I really like this girl. We have our first official date tomorrow night. There you are, Winton, Billy says. An officer and a gentleman. Better bring some flowers, Sergeant. I tell him I know where he can find a lady's slipper corsage. Back in the store, Felicity helps a hiker with boots. Nate shuffles backpacks around on the wall and Billy cheerfully hollers into the phone. It's a timberback and rattlesnake, you idiot. Take a long stick and push him off the trail, he says. There's a pause. Well, try a longer stick. This ain't rocket. Pause. Well, how high do you think you can jump? Pause. You want me to do what? Send somebody up to get you? Buddy covers the receiver with his hand and looks over at me. He went, I've got some kid on the mountain. He says a snake is blocking the trail. And he wants one of us to go up and help him out of there. What do you want me to do? Where's he at? Where you at? Pause. He hears cars on the road and he's next to a big Forest Service sign. He's across the street, about 200 yards away on the trail. I'll go up there and get him. We're on our way, Buddy says, and hangs up the phone. Why'd you hang up on him? What, do you need to talk to the snake? Snakes, as such, don't bother me. What bothers me is the talent they have for unpleasant surprises. Snakes stay out of sight. In the time it takes me to reach this kid, this rattler might have time to hide itself and get angry, and then we'll be no better off than before. As a rule, I simply avoid snakes as much as I can. Luckily for me, there are those who admire snakes and will go looking for them. Hey, Billy, you Want to go catch a snake? Billy is seated on the top step outside the store with Sky by his side. They both get up at once. The dog's tail starts wagging. If Billy had a tail, it would be wagging too. What kind? Sounds like a timberback rattler. Where is it? Holding some kid hostage on the trail about 100 yards up. What? Just follow me. Billy follows at my heels and Sky at his. Within a few moments we see the scared hostage, a heavy-set teenage boy wearing baggy jeans and a Bob Marley t-shirt that hangs just above his knees. His lower lip, which is trembling with fear, is pierced with a gold ring. I call out to the boy and ask his name. My name is Chris. Thanks for coming. The snake, still caught in the middle of the trail, has turned back to face Billy and me. I step aside and let eager Billy come around to within a few feet of it. Sky, keeping her eyes on the snake, makes a wide half-circle down and then back up the steep embankment, comes around next to Chris and sits at his feet. Billy starts talking to the snake in a low, slow tone. He gives her some compliments about her size, she's about 5 feet, and tells her it's time to move on. When he decides to talk to me, he does so out of the side of his mouth, as though he doesn't want the snake to hear what he says. Hey, Winton, you think you can get Sky to speak? What do you want us to say? Make a bark, smartass. Sky, speak, I yell. Sky lifts her head, pokes her ears, and waits for a confirmation of the command. Sky, speak! Speak, girl! She stands up, barks 3 times. The snake turns and challenges Sky, causing the hair on her back to rise. She crouches and inches cautiously forward, growling, then giving 3 more barks. The distraction gives Billy time to move within an arm's reach of the 5-foot monster, and with the speed of lightning he snatches the snake behind the head. Then he turns toward me, putting the face and fangs of the beast within inches of my head. I jump back and catch my heel on a root, and that sends me tumbling down 15 feet of embankment and into a thicket of briars and poison ivy. Billy screams out happily. Look at her, ain't she incredible? Damn, what a rush. You okay down there? I was just trying to show you the snake. Why'd you jump? I shout a few curses at him while he carries the snake off into the woods. Then, under the anxious supervision of Sky, who trots back and forth, nosing my arms and legs, I disentangle myself from the briars and climb back up the embankment. Chris holds out his hand when I get within a few feet of the trail. He's not strong enough to help me much. I'm a big man, but I appreciate the gesture and take his hand. Sir, thank you, he says. I really didn't know what else to do. I really didn't want to hurt it. Your friend there isn't going to kill it, is he? Billy? Oh no, Billy prefers copperheads. He says the timberback rattlers taste like tree bark. Where are you headed after this? Well, I was going to hike for a few months. Sky goes off into the woods to check on Billy and the snake. As we wait for their return, Chris fills me in on his parents' bitter divorce and how his family just doesn't understand him anymore. He and his girlfriend broke up and he needed to get far away from all that noise in my head. Life just isn't worth all this hassle, he says. His father is a financial consultant with Lehman Brothers and travels most of the time. His mother is a commercial real estate agent in Atlanta. When he was younger, his dad took him camping on the top of Blood Mountain. This is one of the few enjoyable memories of his father that he possesses. He left his house a little more than a week ago without telling anybody where he was going. He's been camping out in the woods under a large rock overhang on the Freeman Trail, which skirts Blood Mountain and connects to the AT on each end. Our encounter is on the AT, only a couple 100 yards from the store, but I don't tell him that we knew he was there. We had gotten word about the campsite a few days earlier. We just hadn't seen the camper. It's unlikely that anyone's looking for me. My mum was in New York and my dad, well, I don't know where he is this week. After a few minutes, Billy returns with Sky and we all sit together on the trail while Chris talks. Having a human audience for the first time in many days seems to change him for the better. After a while, his conversation turns from his complaints, his fears and his pains to his fondest childhood memories, his proudest moments, and then to things he wants to do and see. Some things are worth the hassle, after all. He talks about walking the Appalachian Trail, spending a summer in Yosemite, and travelling to Peru to see Incan ruins. He doesn't know why he's talking to us, and we don't know either. I want to say something, feel compelled to offer some kind of fatherly advice, but the voices in the wind keep telling me to shut up. The same voices may be whispering to Billy, who stretches himself out on the ground and chews a piece of grass while he takes in Chris's story. Finally, Chris stands up, shoulders his pack, and picks up his Adidas duffel bag. He kicks a small rock off the trail and starts walking. Where are you going from here? I ask him. Home, he says, Right now, I want to go home. Thank you. I sit on the trail a few more minutes and watch Chris until his pack fades around the bend. In a few minutes, he'll be down at the shop. As Billy and I head back there ourselves, I remember I want to ask him something. Billy, did you hear that last thing Alpine said about John before he took off this morning? What thing? The thing about lockdown? Yeah, lockdown. That's it. Making sure you heard what I said. Alpine had asked off early in the consideration of his date with Jennifer. He needed to clean out his car and get a haircut. When I told him he could go, he had thanked me and then, Oh, I almost forgot. You may want to watch your back. I'm not sure how old John's going to take the news. She's supposed to tell him tonight. Apparently, he can be kind of a loose cannon, so I wouldn't answer your door until you know for certain who's on the other side. We call it lockdown in the army. Thanks again. See you later. With that, Alpine skipped away like a little kid on his way to the patch to pick blueberries for the first time. I tell Billy I don't understand why John would be coming after me. Why would the guy blame me for what happened that night? If he wanted to keep his girlfriend from trading him in at the party, he shouldn't have taken a nap on the picnic table. Loose cannon, like Alpine said, and the guy ain't the brightest crayon in the box. I pluck at some grass by the trail side and we walk along quietly until I put a nagging thought into words. Billy, you think that kid came out here to kill himself? I don't know, Billy says, but if he did, it looks to me like he postponed it. This isn't the first time that I've had the strange feeling that we have intervened or helped someone take a different path, literally sometimes, or make another choice, and it will not be the last. The story is a crossroads, and living here, I get to watch people choose their ways, make their turns left or right, farther or back. For many, these mountains offer refreshment from the everyday, a place to quiet the mind and revitalise the senses. But some come here to seek a more permanent escape. I meet a few every year who tell me that they went into the woods feeling that they'd reached the rope's end, and for those who talk about such things, hiking usually does them good. Nature silences a troubled mind because it is so envelopingly slow. Our agitations of mind don't touch it. Our worries pass through it, bounce off it, but can't disturb it, and eventually they just go away, as though from sheer embarrassment. Without our usual means of winding ourselves into anxiety, the house, the car, the bills, the diet, we simply must find other thoughts, and I think that is why hikers on this trail speak so often of discovering things they had forgotten and of being reminded of how precious life can be. Once the encounter with nature has cleared the static from your head, what remains is what you knew all along, the values that sustain you. In the case of the young hiker Chris, I don't believe that he had the happiest family, but he did have a family that he decided he couldn't abandon. What do you think it was that made him alter course, Billy, if in fact our theory is right? The pine air? The bird song? The breathtaking view from Blood Mountain? I think it was a snake, Billy says. He grins and chews his grass a while. Then he remembers a question of his own. Hey, Winton, he says, that woman with the moccasin flower, whereabouts do you suppose she is now? I say, right about now, she's doing what Chris is doing, I say, turning around. There's an ending to that story about the lady slipper and its executioner. When I told the woman and her sons that the flower was prettier before they killed it, the two boys, both horrified and fascinated to hear the word killed, drew closer to their mother but let their eyes widen and their mouths fall open. They sensed my anger better than she did. That was only the third moccasin flower I'd ever seen. The first two were alive, and I remember they had, in the highest degree, that special kind of beauty that only things in nature can have, the kind of beauty that doesn't care whether anyone sees it. The flowers were content just to be perfect and rooted to the earth, unwatched and alone on a mountainside. Nature isn't made for us. Wild things are beautiful because they don't belong to us. The moccasin flower woman said she had one more question while Billy and I were handy there on the balcony. At your service, Billy said to her, bowing low as he shot me a glance. Ooh, a gentleman, she said with a giggle. Anyway, my question is, the map I was reading said this was a wildlife management area. Well, I want to know, where are all the animals? Sometimes the stars align themselves to reveal the ignorance of humanity, leaving me to wonder in the face of questions like the one I've just been asked, how our species managed to survive all these centuries. Maybe it's simply a matter of time until we slip on the final banana peel, or maybe there truly is a forgiving God. But the history of our dealings with the natural world may prove that if we destroy ourselves, we'll do it by mistake and probably without even noticing. You know, that's a good question, I said. Where are all the animals, Billy? You're in luck, miss, They were on loan to the Atlanta Zoo for a while, and now they're back, Billy said. If you'd come last week, you would have missed them. Billy used to be a keeper at the wildlife management area, I explained. Billy pulled out his journal and pen from his back pocket and proceeded to write down the feeding times for bear, rabbit, skunk, raccoon, deer, turkey, and the red-tailed hawk, and told the lady that the best place to view these events was down at Helton Creek near the top of the waterfalls. Just go up the highway about 1.5 miles and turn right when you see the sign for Helton Creek Cottages, Billy said. Then just go as straight as you can. You'll see the big tent. You can't miss it. But you better leave quickly or you'll miss the bear feeding. That's one of my favourites. The boys tugged on their mother's jungle vest, begging to leave. She thanked Billy for the information, and the three ran off together to a white Cadillac Escalade, which, around the time Alpine came up to tell us of his new love, would have just started its bumpy ride over 15 or 20 miles of the nastiest dirt road in the state, on its way to a petting zoo that didn't exist. The lady's slipper got her revenge.